Blog Talk Radio.
The following broadcast is brought to you by the iGolf Sports Network.
Golf Talk Live is sponsored by the iGolf Sports Network and Golf Tips Magazine. Here's Andrew to tell you more about our sponsors.
iGolf Sports is a live stream broadcast and media production company providing quality programming designed to attract the golfing enthusiast. And Golf Tips, the game's most in-depth instruction magazine, including reviews on the latest equipment, tips from top teaching professionals, all designed to help you improve from tee to green. Welcome to Golf Talk Live with your host, Ted Odorico. Join Ted each week as he speaks with some of the best in golf. This week's special guest will join us a bit later. But first up is another great discussion on Coach's Corner. So let's introduce tonight's Coach's Corner panel.
All right, good evening, everybody, and once again, welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and we've got a great show for you tonight. We're going to be starting things off here in just a moment with, of course, another exciting discussion here on the panel, Coach's Corner panel, and I'm going to introduce the guys here in just a moment. And a little bit later on, I'm extra excited, if you will. I'm going to be joined by Kraig, Kann, founder of the Kann Advisory Group, and you may recall he was a former television broadcaster with the Golf Channel for many years and has done radio on Sirius XM and also has his own podcast, Tracks for Success. So he's going to be joining me a little later on. I'm excited to have him on board, and we're going to have a great show tonight. So let me introduce the guys. We're actually waiting for one, but I'm going to introduce the other guys, and then we'll keep an eye out for him as well. Joining me on the show tonight is PGA teacher professional Brian Dobby. He works at the Trump National in Bedminster, New Jersey, formerly at the Montclair Golf Club, where he spent 18 years and won 5 New Jersey section awards. He was the 2012 Teacher of the Year and has been ranked as number 7 in Golf Digest top teachers in New Jersey. Also joining on the panel is Paul Castor, one of the country's leading golf coaches, recognized by Golf Digest as one of the country's best teachers since 2017. Twice been honored by U.S. Kids Golf as one of their top 50 kids coaches. Paul works with golfers of all skill levels, including professionals who have competed in several majors. He serves on the advisory boards of several organizations, Foresight Sports and 4D Motion Sports, and is Level 2 and Junior Golf TPI certified. Also Aimpoint Golf and Science and Motion Sports, and Level 3 certified Super Speed Golf Coach. Also, hopefully joining on the panel is going to be John Hughes, PGA Master Professional and Honorary President of the North Florida PGA Section. In 2013, he was the PGA of America's Horton Smith Award recipient. He's also a senior editor and a Golf Tips Magazine Top 25 instructor, plus part of Golf Tips top advisory staff. So we'll keep an eye out for him, guys. He should be hopefully joining us. He may be running a little bit late on the range, so we'll see what happens. But all right, guys, so we're going to talk about tonight on the show, we're going to talk about some of the ways and some of the key areas of hitting crisp irons. Everybody seems to really struggle. I did a poll recently through Golf Tips through our email subscribers, and one of the questions was, what was, if you had a free lesson, if you will, if you had a free golf lesson, what would you most like to have it focus on? And overwhelmingly, a lot of people said, I'd like to be able to hit my irons a little more crisp. So put together 5 key tips, if you will, to help master those crisp irons. And I'm going to start in the order that I introduced to you guys. So, Brian, I'm going to start with you. And one of the key factors is about keeping your head steady. This obviously makes things much easier. The average tour player moves their head about an inch during a swing. Tour player, but the average player in many golf lessons, and you've probably experienced this, tends to move their head much more than an inch when they swing. So talk, because we've heard so many things. You got to keep your head steady. You got to keep it down. You've heard so many things. What's sort of the generalization, if you will, or the truth about the head? What role does it play, if anything, in the golf swing? Is it to be rock steady, or can there be some movement? And if so, which way can it safely move without really impacting the swing? And Brian, that's for you first.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me on the show. It's great to be back with you. Concerning the irons, Ted, I think the head shouldn't be rock steady. The head moves in the golf swing, and having a thought of keeping it steady might restrict other parts of the swing, especially the backswing. I just think hitting crisp irons, for most people, they typically have too much weight on their right side coming into the ball. They're, leaning back. I'm talking higher handicap players. They kind of lean back and try to lift the ball up in the air. So their angle of attack gets a little bit more ascending as they come into it, and that can lead to some tops and definitely not crisp irons. So I like to see my players kind of favor their left side a little bit more at address. So after they make their turn, they're coming into it, and getting a more descending angle of attack is going to really get some crisp irons going for your average player. I just see too much weight to the right in the upper body, tilting to the right also. I think that's just a bad combination when it comes to hitting good irons, Ted.
So, Paul, let me ask you, I want to ask you the same question essentially, and just to specify a little bit more on the head movement and that, because there is obviously going to be some head movement, but we see a lot of players, a lot of amateur players specifically, come out of posture a lot. You'll see them, either they'll sway quite a bit into the backswing and they get way off the ball and their head will move several inches in the backswing and then have to obviously compensate by moving several. And then we'll see a lot of them where their head will actually lift up because they're coming out of that posture, and then they're going down as they're coming in through impact. So what role do you see the head playing, if any? What typically is an okay movement of the head, and what do you think is sort of you put a big X across it?
Well, I think you can think about all of this in terms of sway, and that's pelvis sway and torso sway, because your head's sitting on top of your torso. Your torso is sitting on top of your pelvis. And we've gathered a lot of data over the years. Been teaching a lot lately with this new great technology, SportsBox AI, and Phil Cheatham is involved in that, and he's shared a lot of cool data with us, and we know that you're not likely to sway your upper body if your pelvis doesn't sway. So if your pelvis sways, your upper body's going to sway, and if your upper body sways, your head's moving. There's definitely a tendency among a lot of golfers to set up, like Brian said, if you're right eye dominant, oftentimes you're going to tilt your head to the right so that you can see your target. And then that will tend to put your weight over your right foot, and you'll have a lot of right side bend. And then it will be very difficult for the average person to feel what they need to feel at impact, which is weight forward, like Brian said, and your hips rotated to the left. But, a combination of setting up a little bit more stacked on top of the golf ball and then not, avoiding a sideways movement with your pelvis and feeling more rotation off the golf ball is usually going to help a lot with keeping your head steady. I don't think people are super aware of where their heads are in space while swinging a golf club, so.
It's not something. Yeah.
It's a roundabout answer to your question, but.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, it's not something that they're necessarily going to be conscious of. I always think back to when Jack Nicklaus, used to talk about how Jack Grout used to, grab his hair because he was moving his head too much and trying to keep it steady. And I think, some of the more modern swings, back then you always had that sort of that reverse C. And a lot of players, Johnny Miller was one that famously used to see it. So they tended to keep in sort of earlier golf swings, you would see that their head would remain a little bit more steady than what you see today. But again, there's no real try or true way. I think that the purpose of in reference to the head is, I think, when you get too much lateral movement either way. And as both of you pointed out, when your weight is sort of falling backwards, it's because you're not making a proper weight shift. And when you're doing that, that's going to obviously, if your body goes one way, your head, of course, is going to follow. And that was really sort of Brian, you kind of jumped ahead on me here, but really talking about shifting your weight forward with irons. A lot of players tend to, even at address, don't even get a 50-50 balance. They tend to actually have a lot of their weight because they're trying to think, okay, I got to really load up here on the right, for the right-handed golfers, and I've got to get loaded up in the backswing. So I'm going to kind of have my weight starting out a little bit more to the back foot or the trail foot, and then they end up not being able to transition through impact and getting onto that left side. So do you have a drill or maybe a tip that you like to offer your students to help them think about keeping that weight and keeping it forward when they're working with their irons?
Ted, one of the drills I like to do is, controlling the low point of the swing. So I demonstrate, say, I like to go into a sand trap so I can easily draw lines and stuff, but I'll draw a line in the sand and then I'll start making some divots with the emphasis on where my club's striking the ground, way to the right of that line, say the line's in the middle of my stance, and then I'll start moving it up towards the line in the sand, and then what am I doing to create my descent ahead of the line? And they notice that my weight's shifting to the left or I'm not leaning back to the right. So a good drill is finding out where the bottom of your swing is, and I like to have it bottom out to the right and to the left of my center point, just so my students can learn. And then once we get it just ahead of that center line where that club's striking the ground, let's put the ball there and try to create that downswing to get that crisp iron shot and get that divot in the right place. I would try that drill.
Yeah, there's so many really good drills out there that, obviously a lot of different coaches use. Paul, what about yourself? I mean, I know you do a lot of drills and a lot of practice sessions as well with your students, a variety of different players. Are there some drills that you've seen, some of the better players that you've worked with that have worked really, really well that you're now sort of transitioning into some of your students that are sort of not really learning the game, but sort of starting out with a little bit less skill level? What are some of the drills that you use to help get their weight shifted forward?
Well, yeah, and I think just to go back real quick, I think some of this also really depends on the person and their body. So, we know in our section, Mike Adams is a pretty well-known guy, and he's done a lot of great work on measuring people and understanding kind of their pivot styles. And I definitely believe that, he's been correct in some of that stuff too. But to answer your question, if somebody is not, transferring their weight and doesn't have, say, 80% of their weight on their front foot, which would be a good guideline, and I use a balance plate and a force plate to kind of measure that, then a good old-fashioned step drill, where as you taking the club back, you're taking your lead foot and kind of stepping back toward your rear foot, your trail foot. And as the club reaches the top of the backswing, but not after, you're stepping and planting your front foot. So the golf club is still moving up while you're planting your left foot and then turning into the golf ball. And that also helps create some stretch between your upper body and your lower body. So it helps with both kind of the sequence of the golf swing, but also proper use of your pressure. So that would be a big one for proper use of the ground and weight shift, pressure shift. And it's something, I actually like motion drills a lot like that. So anything, you could cross your feet, cross your ankles and try to hit golf balls, and you'll realize pretty quickly that if you try to sway with your legs crossed, you'll fall down. You're definitely not going to make solid contact. So,
yeah, that's a definite way to ensure that you're not going to sway too much, is if you want to fall either way. And you're both are exactly right. 80% or more of the touring professionals, they're arriving at impact with their weight on their forward leg. So, in most of the average weekend golfers, you're looking at roughly about 55% of their weight. So there's a big difference. And obviously that's not going to work, and that's why you see the tour players are able to hit their irons so much more crisp. And just one more tip I want to throw out there. This is one that I've used. It's been very, very common for years, and that is using a training stick or an old shaft in the ground about a hand's width away from your front leg. And obviously the idea is as you're transitioning through, if you bump into the stick when you're swinging, you've moved your weight forward correctly. If you're not able to or you're just barely touching it, then you know you're not transferring your weight. So, yeah, I like motion drills as well. There's a lot of good ones out there, and obviously you want to reach out to your local golf professional, and if you're not currently taking lessons now, and if you're having issues hitting your irons, they've got some great tips and drills that can help you do that to make that transition and getting that proper weight shift. And again, for your irons particularly, you want to have like a feeling of your weight a little bit more on your forward leg. Another one too, guys, and Brian, I'm going to come back to you, and we always hear about keeping the front wrist, and again, we're talking for right-handed golfers, so that would be your left hand, keeping that wrist flat. One of the things that we often see is a flat left wrist sort of prevents the club passing the front arm prior to impact, swing flaw that generates a lot of fat and scald shots. So what do you think about that, and is there a tip or drill that you have for having that feeling so that golfers understand the position of that front left wrist in a case of a right-handed golfer, or conversely the other right wrist if it's a left-handed?
One of the things I like to do is, on your lead side hand, if you have your golf glove on, I'll put like a popsicle stick inside the glove along the left wrist there. So when you get up to the top of the swing, if your wrist starts to cup a little bit, that stick's going to go into your wrist, and if you keep it flat, obviously that's going to control the club face at the top. But, something that they can feel in the left wrist that keeps them out of that cupping motion at the top, and that's a good drill that I use also. Just putting something in my glove just to stabilize the wrist a little bit. That seems to work for me, Ted, and I would recommend that.
Is well said, Paul. I want to ask you. I'm going to move on because that's really not, I think, too much more you could add to that.
No, there are only a couple of ways to work on that, but there's...
Right, exactly. So I think he's pretty much covered that as well. So, one of the problems I think that a lot of golfers have with their irons is a sort of fear of taking a divot. And the reason why I say that, it's a fear of really hitting the ground. And a lot of that goes to what, you guys talked about a few moments ago, and that is coming in at a very steep angle of attack. So they kind of compensate. If they feel they're coming in too steep, they kind of back off a little bit and maybe even stand up out of it and that. And that goes to what I was talking about earlier about the head kind of going up and then coming back down to meet the ball. So they're not really, swinging at a level keel, if you will. Obviously, the club goes, the club does go up and has to come back down to meet impact. Pardon me. But your body isn't coming out of posture when you're doing that. So what are some things that you find that gives a lot of amateur golfers a problem when it comes to their irons? The irons should be, we always hear about the driver, and we always hear about, they want to hit it farther and so forth. But what are some of the things that you've seen in some of your lessons that cause a lot of difficulty for your students, obviously prior to working with you, but when you first start working with them, that's giving them a lot of problem? What are some of the common faults, if you will, that you see in good iron play with them?
Well, I think club face control is one of the things that is like a big separator between good players and less skilled golfers. So elite level players, they're very aware of the club face and they know where it's pointing, and they have a good sense for how to make the golf ball go where they want it to go with the club face. And I think for whatever reason, maybe it's just not as much practice, not as much time spent with a golf club in your hand. I don't see that understanding or connection or focus outside of themselves and externally on the target with, a typical kind of 16 handicap club player. So getting getting real aware of the tool and the and the face, and that we're hitting the ball with the face. We're trying to make the golf ball go somewhere. That is a big thing. I think the other things that we see, just open club face, holding the club in the wrong position, and especially in your left hand. But your right hand is awfully important too, and making sure that kind of matches your body and the way your joints are lined up, and that can have a huge effect on the path of the club, club face control, low point control. Like Brian mentioned, trying to land. Very, very important. Probably the first most important thing in golf is that we get the golf ball first and then the ground, and we have to control the bottom of the swing to advance the golf ball and get it to go kind of in a predictable zone, down the fairway. So your grip is awfully important for doing that. You have to make sure that you're gripping it really much more in your fingers than in the left hand than I typically see a lot of people. And that'll allow you to close the club face a lot more easily.
Yeah, and we tend to see a lot of people gripping it in the palms, and then they're not really getting sufficient wrist cock either. So, and Brian, I know you see a lot of, different level players as well, from, some of our scratch golfers, if you will, and elite players, right down to our, as we call them, our weekend warriors. And I think, Paul raises some interesting points, one being, it all really starts with the grip. I mean, if you don't have a good grip, then the club face isn't probably going to be coming in squarely at impact. And then also your balance, as we've talked about, if you're not balanced correctly and you're not setting up correctly, a lot of it points to that. But are there some other things too? Is it just a matter of not understanding? Are they focusing too much on trying to get into the correct positions of their golf swing and not just letting it happen naturally? I mean, really, the golf swing is a natural movement. We're not forcing the movement. It's a natural swinging movement as we get into position and we swing the club. The weight of the club head can basically take us where we need to go, and conversely when we're coming out through the downswing. So what is it, in your opinion, that a lot of golfers don't understand about the golf game and ultimately affects their iron play?
Well, Ted, great point. I think with the average to high handicappers, I see them swinging at the ball instead of through the ball. And I always try to explain that, the golf swing doesn't end at the ball. Try to just swing through and what's the club's responsibility? The club's responsibility is to get through and elevate the ball with the face angle and stuff. And I just see players, all their energy's kind of going at it instead of through it. So that would be a key point I would stress. But another point that we haven't talked about when it comes to crisp irons is I see a lot of higher handicap players with clubs that don't fit them. Maybe they're and typically they're too heavy, and they have shafts that are way too stiff for them and heavy, and that's definitely going to affect how you hit your irons. I think making sure you have clubs that fit you with the right shaft and flex goes right into everything we're talking about tonight, because if the club is too heavy or too light, it's going to change the path of the club and how you release it and how much speed you create. And those are all important factors in hitting crisp irons, I think.
Yeah, well said. And Paul, something else too is the actual swing itself. This winter I had the opportunity to visit the Q Series for the LPGA and watch a lot of these young ladies as they work towards earning their LPGA cards for 2022 season. And what was really interesting, I managed to get up there bright and early every morning for the 4 days that I was able to watch it, and went out to the range and actually watched them warm up. And what was really interesting, especially, they worked with a lot of their clubs, but particularly with their irons, the one thing I really noticed that differs a lot from our amateur players is they tended to take the club away very slowly, like it was almost methodical. It was sort of a slow, smooth, up to the backswing, and there was a slight pause at the top, and then as they started to come through, it sort of slowly went, and then all of a sudden, as they're coming into impact, they would then swing the club a little bit more effectively. So it was a very deliberate movement. It was not just this sort of snatching back that we see a lot of amateurs do, and then the sort of a deceleration coming through. Is that something that you notice too, sort of between the pros and the amateurs? I mean, obviously we see some players that really, almost step out of their shoes on the PGA Tour, but for the most part, if you look at some of the real better players that have a lot of rhythm and tempo to their swing, they take it back really a little bit slower than what you would typically see a lot of our amateurs do. What do you think about that?
I think some of the players that we're seeing on the PGA Tour doing that, like Bryson, know a lot of interesting things about science and the kind of, we would call it the stretching and contracting that's happening in your backswing. And to create speed and distance, we've got to stretch muscles and then contract out of that stretch. I think with the, what we see with the average person is that they're really swinging the club hard with their arms and their hands, and they're trying to create a lot of speed with their arms and their hands, and not using the ground and their feet. And you can swing the golf club slower and feel the weight of it if you're driving the motion a little bit more with your lower body. And the golf swing is a sequence. And so we don't, for the average golfer who might not be coordinated like Bryson DeChambeau, might not practice as much as he has in his life, it's going to be easier to maintain your timing if you don't go extremely fast off the golf ball, and if you kind of make that smooth takeaway, you can load your body a little bit more effectively than maybe, than if you rushed your backswing and you went a little bit too quick. So I think tempo is a good thing to focus on. It's extremely important tempo and timing, and the average golfer would probably do well to kind of slow the pace of their backswing down. So I think those were some good observations, Ted.
Yeah, because I noticed that when I watched the young ladies practicing, and even when they were out in the golf course, they would go through their pre-shot routines. But when they actually were swinging the golf club, they were very, as I said, very methodical in their backswing. Now, obviously, there's exceptions to the rule. Some have a quicker tempo, so it actually appears like they're swinging faster than they are. But when you really sort of count it out, it's not as quick as it looks. And they're getting themselves set. There's that slight pause at the top, which a lot of amateurs don't do. A lot of amateurs do not. There's no difference between their backswing and their transition. It just is back and back through again. There isn't a slight hesitation, and there should be. Again, it's very minimal in the grand scheme of things, but nevertheless, it is, and it's because they need to get set before they begin their transition into the downswing, and obviously swinging, as Brian pointed out, swinging through the golf ball. So it's just a very interesting thing, and I wonder, as you pointed out as well, Paul, that if many of the amateurs would look at focusing more on, instead of club head speed and so on, working on their tempo and their timing and the transitioning of their swing from backswing to their follow-through with more of an even pace, if you will, and not trying to sort of snatch the club back and then trying to rip it through or decelerate because they think, well, I'm going to hit it too far, so I've got to slow it down. And, Brian, you mentioned as well not actually following through. In some cases, they're sort of hitting the ball and then stopping shortly after, so they're not really getting the full effect of the golf club as well. So I think there's a lot of different factors. We've touched on a few of them here, and obviously with the benefit of seeing the golfer and what the specific problems might be, makes it a little bit more challenging. But I think if they work on, again, number one, make sure that you get in a good posture and that you're well balanced with your irons. You want to have your weight, as you both have mentioned, a little bit towards your lead foot. That would be the left for right-handed, right foot for your left-handed golfer. And then, you want to make sure your grip is sound and that you've got the club face square at address. So that way you're going to make good, solid contact with it. And then you want to make sure when you're going through the transition, you're not swaying excessively in the backswing, and when you're coming through in the downswing, that you're transitioning that weight onto the lead foot and following through. And I think if you do a lot of those things and do some of the drills that you've heard the guys mention earlier on, I think for you listeners out there, you're going to find you're going to hit your irons a little bit more crisper. And if you're still in doubt, I urge you to reach out. Depending on where you are, you can go online and you can visit the PGA of America and search out some professionals, or the LPGA as well, and search out a golf professional in your area to help you with your game. All right, guys, I want to move on to a different topic. And as you both know, being up in the more of the Northeast, that we're looking at beginning a new season for many. Brian, you mentioned that. I'm going to come to you first. So we're beginning a new golf season for many. Some have already managed to get out there and swing a little bit. But I think the first thing when you're starting out with a new year, because many people, especially up in the colder areas, haven't really had as much time to practice. Maybe they don't have indoor facilities to be able to work at. I think you have to begin every hole as though it's the first hole in your round. Obviously, you're going to hit number one. That is your first hole. But I think the first step in beginning a new season is to treat each hole as an independent and not worry about the scoring so much, but just focus on the shots at hand. What are your thoughts with respect to that, beginning every hole as though it's your first hole of the round?
Ted, that's a great point. You know, just trying to stay in the moment, I think. Most amateurs and high handicap players are always playing in the past and the future when they're playing. So if you look at every hole as a new hole, that first tee shot is all you're thinking about, and I think that puts you right in the process, right into the present. And I want you to visualize a nice tee shot and try to recall, your last good swing that you hit with that driver, if it's a driver hole. I think we play golf with our eyes and our recall, our memory, and our feel. Try to really key on what that last good shot you hit felt like and visualize it. And I don't think a lot of amateurs do a lot of that. They're always kind of thinking of a body part or something to get their swing going, and they're forgetting about the ball flight they're trying to see, the trajectory they're trying to see. And I think, pros, do a better job of that. And they definitely stay more in the moment. So I guess if you look at every hole as that first hole, I think that would be a good thought right there, Ted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Paul, I think another area that needs to focus on, and this is especially when you're beginning a new season, because again, you don't want to be thinking about last season. You don't want to, especially if you've had some bad rounds or towards the end of the season, maybe things just go as well. Last thing you want to do is start dragging that into a new season. So you've got to really develop an ability to sort of block out that negative baggage, if you will, and also to be able to block out distractions. I mean, a lot of players, we've seen this many, many times, even at the professional level, they'll be at a course and maybe you get a little bit of especially at the Phoenix Open, you get a lot of rowdiness in the crowds, and it's not always easy. Sometimes you just have to go with it and you play to it. But sometimes in a tournament when everything's when all the marbles are in play, you have to be able to block that out, and that's where practicing, sort of getting into a mental zone becomes paramount. What are your thoughts here, and what can a golfer do to sort of help keep away or block out those distractions? What are some things that they can be saying to themselves or doing to practice that?
Boy, there's a lot there. That's
yep. Lot to unpack.
I think we need to be in the present, like Brian said. I sometimes tell people, every shot on the golf course has the same value, which means, whether it's the first shot on your first tee shot or the third shot on 18, you have to give that shot the same amount of focus and just be there and focus on all of the factors that you have to take into account to hit a good shot. I've been meditating for about 5 or 6 years, and it's amazing how close that actually feels to being in the zone. Mm-hmm. And I've been lucky to be kind of in flow playing golf a few times in my life. And so would highly recommend people start learning about that. If you haven't started doing it already, TM is really useful. Controlling your breathing and learning how to be aware of your breathing. If you get bent out of shape, don't let it last for very long. You're going to hit some bad shots. You're playing an obstacle course, so the course is going to challenge you and you're going to make some mistakes. But you have to be able to get past those pretty quickly and control your emotions. And breathing and controlling your breathing makes a world of difference toward those other things, that I mentioned, like controlling your emotions and the meditation stuff. And I use that all the time when I'm playing now, and I teach it to my clients, and it helps them. So that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, those are some great points. Because I especially early on in the season, guys, a lot of players are very anxious. They get anxious. They're nervous. They're not sure how they're going to do this season. And
there's a lot of anxiousness in the world right now, Ted, too.
Right. Well, we having all that factored in as well is just doubly more. But for sure, and when you do that, then the anxiety sort of sets in, and people get up there, and we always talk about the first tee jitters. Knees are knocking and whatever. Always worried about hitting those first few shots. Learning proper breathing techniques can help calm those nerves down a little bit. And obviously, little nerves is okay, but I think, some good breathing techniques and meditation for some that has worked as well. So there's a lot of different things. A lot of professional sports athletes now are actually even turning to things like yoga, believe it or not. Even I know Catherine Roberts, who has taught yoga for golfers for a number of years, is actually teaching several teams in the Major League Baseball League yoga, various different stretching and yoga positions to help get them. It's not so much about getting them into shape, but getting them more relaxed and being able to loosen up and be ready for the game. And it's been very, very successful. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. And I know, Paul, you touched on a few there, and I think they're extremely important because it can be very stressful for a person that, again, that's not an elite player or elite level to be able to get out there, and especially early in the season. Brian, I think another thing, too, that we often see a lot of amateurs neglect, and I know that the pros do. They may not talk about it, but I know that they do that. And that is setting some small goals for not just the overall season. Obviously, we want to improve and lower our scores over the season, but we need to set some small goals even for each round of golf. Number one, that are achievable, and number two, that are realistic. What are your thoughts here? And maybe give us some examples of what maybe some goals might be that a golfer, especially a high handicapper, might want to set for themselves early in the season.
Let's talk about for a single round, Ted. What I like to do is teach my students to have a dream goal, an intermediate goal, and then a satisfactory goal for your round of golf. So say you typically shoot 80 for a round of golf. So the satisfactory goal for that day would be shooting an 80. The intermediate goal would be, say, shooting a 76 or 77, and the dream goal for that day would be, for that player, maybe shooting less than 75. And I think where amateurs, their expectations, I think they typically play in the dream state where they think today's going to be my day. I hit it really well on the range. And when we tend to play in the dream state or the dream goal, we have too much pressure on our subconscious because, say, we bogey the first couple holes and you're saying to yourself, man, today was going to be my best day. But if we play with a satisfactory goal for the day, it gives us a little leeway subconsciously. So if we do have a couple bogeys or whatever, satisfactory would have been an 80 for that player that day. And I think when we get ahead of ourselves and we put too much expectations on our game, tends to get the game going in the wrong direction, and that's where I see a lot of amateurs. That's where their rounds fall apart. So I break it down to dream goal, intermediate goal, and satisfactory goal for that day, and you have to be realistic. I think if you can be realistic and say, hey, I'm really not hitting it that good today, maybe my satisfactory goal might be an 82 or an 83. Just, you have to be realistic when you set those goals, and I don't think amateurs tend to deal with reality that much. They tend to overthink or their capabilities or their skill level sometimes. So that's where I would go with that one, Ted. Dream, satisfaction, and intermediate goals.
Yeah, and certainly some good ones. And I think also, too, we see a lot of, players that might even want to simplify it even more. And maybe just the fact of getting out there and swing with a fluid swing and not merely so much worried about the score even for those that maybe really struggle with their game. For a little better player, if they're shooting 80, they're typically a little bit better player, still not certainly a scratch player, but certainly getting up there. They've probably over the years have knocked a few strokes off. So they're wanting to just get out there and keep the run going, if you will. And sometimes it's just a matter of just going out there and keeping the swing fluid and just getting warmed up and for the season, not try to be unrealistic and early on in the season. Let's see how things are going to go and see where they're going to happen, and then progress as we move along. And Paul, this sort of brings us to a last one. This is one I know we've talked about many, many times on Coach's Corner, and that is really developing a really good pre-shot routine, especially early in the season. I mean, people have had pre-shot routines in their golfing life, but a lot of times when we move from season to season, things might need to be adjusted or might need to be redefined or fine-tuned. But that should be one, too. I think that should be something, a goal to set from day one, is let's get out there and let's create maybe a new pre-shot routine that's going to be effective throughout the day, or even redefine an existing one, maybe retune it a little bit or adjust it or make sure that we're doing things correctly. So maybe walk us through a little bit of that, if you wouldn't mind, on the importance of the pre-shot routine and how we can get off to a good start for the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the European Tour did a study a while ago, and I think they studied top 75 players on tour, and the guys who, and this was the men's tour, the guys who had a very consistent pre-shot routine, kind of went through a similar, sequence of steps, and spent 3 seconds or less over the golf ball, made the cut. I may be flipping these numbers, but made the cut 50% more of the time and made 40% more money. So process is incredibly important. Having a predictable kind of tempo and timing to not just your golf swing, like you mentioned before, but the timing of your preparation for the shot and your pre-shot routine. So the way I kind of describe this a lot of the time is you plan, you prepare, and then you execute. So you plan, you have to have a plan for the shot based on what the golf course is asking you to do, based on the situation. And that's when you choose your club and the kind of shot that you're going to play. And then you prepare, taking practice swings and kind of visualizing the shot and trying to figure out, how do I need to swing this golf club to make the shot happen? And then execute is you set up to the golf ball, put the club behind it, aim it, and get your feet set, and then go and trust what you just prepared. And if, generally speaking, if you follow those steps, without overthinking the mechanics of your swing and focusing on the shot, you're gonna do a lot better. And then getting in a consistent kind of timing of that, and sometimes timing how long it takes. You can videotape yourself doing a pre-shot routine. You can look at how long it takes, or I guess we don't say videotape anymore. I'm dating myself, but you can film yourself on on your phone and time how long it takes from when you pull the club out of your bag to when you hit the golf ball, how long it takes for you to make the decision once you've put the bag down. All things that, you can kind of look at, and sometimes it's going to take a little bit longer, but the longer you spend making a choice, usually the less committed you're going to be. And we need to be committed to make good golf swings too. So
yeah,
all things I think that anybody can do, really.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think one other thing too is, once you've taken those steps and you've, executed a successful pre-shot routine and you've now, hit the shots, even if it doesn't come off the way that you want it to, let's say, you wanted just to, hit it up the left side of the fairway a little bit because that's going to give you a better approach to the green. Even if you end up over on the right, rather than assessing everything, then make notes. Make notes. Keep a little pad of paper with you in your back pocket. You can and just make a note on each hole. How many putts you made. Keep stats and record that information, and then analyze it a little bit later on after the round or when you're with your coach the next time, and go over some of the points. Say, here's what I was trying to do on this hole here, and here's what ultimately ended up happening. And then you can look at and isolate some of the areas of your game that might be struggling with. But the other thing too is just about the pre-shot routine. We often, and I know you both have seen this as well on the practice tee, and that is you will see somebody start off the first couple of holes with the same routine, and as soon as the proverbial wheels fall off the bus, the routine changes. Suddenly their pace is quickening up. Suddenly, instead of 2 waggles, it's 1 waggle, or maybe it's 3 or 4 waggles. They're gripping and re-gripping the club, and it's an entirely different routine. By the time they get to about hole number 4 or 5, the pre-shot routine they once had is completely gone. It's now morphed into something else. So you've got to find something that you're comfortable with and works, and even if it's not working the way you had hoped it was going to work, you don't want to change it mid-round. You want to wait, and that's something you work on the next time you go to the practice range or you're with your coach and say, you know what, we need to find something that's just not holding up. And then once you do, you have to stick with it. I think too many people give up too easily because, as we all know, even the average tour player is not hitting every shot the way they want every single time. They're missing shots. They're not hitting it exactly the way they want, but they're not changing their routines. They still follow the same pre-shot routine. They still go through the same steps for every single shot throughout the round. And then they deal with it afterwards. When they're off the golf course, and if there's some minor tweaking or adjustments, that's when they do it. And I think that's what a lot of golfers fail to do in the high handicap range. The other thing is, Brian, I'm going to give you the last question here, is what can we do overall as we get ready to prepare for this season? What should we be doing now? If you're just coming out of hibernation, shall we say, what's the first thing that you want to do? What are the first steps as a player that you want to do before you start getting into a full season?
A couple things on that, Ted. I think starting out the season, I like to work more on my short game to just get a feel for playing the game again. Hitting putts, hitting lag putts, and then moving into chipping and then pitching. I like a lot of small swings, knowing that that's going to gradually feed into my full swing. I think most amateurs go directly to the driving range, full swing driver. They wear themselves out quickly. They get tired physically and mentally, and they start chasing it. And I think they need to work from the hole out in the spring and gradually build up some stamina for the full swing. Stay off the range as much as you can, and let your game come back that way. I've been playing golf my whole life, and I still like to let me get a putter in my hand first, and what's it feel like to hit the middle of the putter and hit some 40, 50-foot putts, and then chip and pitch and hit a couple bunker shots before I go to the range and hit the full swings. I think the other thing, you need to start getting into shape to play in the spring. So even if you don't have time to practice and hit balls, go out and walk for a couple miles just to get your legs underneath you. That's because as we know, once our legs go, the swing's going to go. I think getting in shape is important also as we start the spring. But I would start with the short game and let that feed into my full game in the spring. And the other thing, we're not in shape to play a lot, and I see a lot of people injuring themselves quickly because they're hitting too many balls on the range. You got to pace yourself in the spring. That would be my advice.
Yeah, and I think just a final point, Paul, to add to that would be, in addition to keeping yourself in shape, is nutrition. A lot of times we see golfers out there that don't keep, not only do they not keep themselves in very good shape, but they don't really eat very well. And they get out there, and by the time they hit the turn, they're running out of steam. They're not eating very well. They're not eating good, nutritious food. And again, I'm not suggesting we all have to jump on some special diet. But I think if you want to be a better player, especially when you start getting into the warmer climates and warmer temperatures, if you're not hydrating and you're not keeping yourself fueled properly, you're going to run out of steam well before your round hits that turn. Any thoughts or suggestions as we get ready to wrap up on what we can do to help prevent that?
Absolutely true about nutrition and hydration. I see it actually with some pretty accomplished junior golfers. And so it doesn't really matter, I think, who you are. You have to take care of yourself and take care of your body. And, Dobbs mentioned some of those things. And I've known Brian for a while, so sometimes I slip into his nickname. But, I think it's important to take care of yourself. You're physically, you have to. Golf is an explosive motion. The golf swing. You're walking a fair amount. Even if you ride, you're still going to be walking a fair amount. And pack peanut butter and honey sandwich and some cashews and maybe a pear, and a hydration mix from Shackley actually makes a really good one. Noon. There's a bunch of different products out there that will just give you the electrolytes you need and keep your brain functioning. You see a lot of people who start to kind of flag or fail coming down the back nine, and it's more likely from poor nutrition, eating a hot dog at the turn, and getting getting a spike of blood pressure or whatever, blood sugar and nitrates, and then you kind of crash. So you definitely need to take care of fueling your body, because you're out there for 4.5, 5 hours sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where we see a lot of, many of our high handicap golfers spend so much time trying to perfect and work on their golf game, but they forget about the other aspect of it, and that is themselves. If you're not keeping yourselves in shape, and again, when we get it when you get up near 60s, 70s, 80s, and whatnot, and you're still able to get out there and play. You're not thinking about running marathons. Maybe you have to make other adjustments. As we get a little bit older, maybe instead of playing 18, maybe just 9 might be another alternative. So that way you've still got some energy a little bit. Maybe doing 18 when you're 80 years old is not, I'm not suggesting that you can't, but that may be a factor you may want to look at, or maybe even, play a little more than 9. Maybe not play quite the full 18. Maybe just play a dozen. A lot of courses are offering different packages like that now, so you can play 9 plus a couple of extras, and so being able to be fresh while you're out there, hydration, not just drinking water, but replenishing those electrolytes and other things, fueling your body. Is going to make a world of difference at any age. And you're exactly right, Paul. I think that that's an area that gets overlooked even by junior golfers. We see a lot of junior golfers think, well, I'm 20 years old or I'm 18 years old and it's not a big deal. I can get out there and, I can handle 100-degree weather. But, when you're out there for 2 or 3 rounds in a tournament, and especially when it starts getting a little steamy, as it will here in a few months, even the youngest start to feel a little bit flustered So it's always important to do that. But great discussion, guys. I know we kind of covered a few different things here, but appreciate, as always. And unfortunately, John wasn't able to make it tonight, obviously, as many of us are. He's probably was busy out in the golf course a little bit longer, but I know he'll join us on another show as well. But what I want to do is give each of you guys an opportunity to let the folks know if they want to reach out. So, Brian, we'll go with you, and then Paul.
Sure, Ted. First off, thanks for having me on the show. It's always great to be a guest. And, Paul, it was a pleasure sharing golf talk with you, and I'm going to take you up on that meditation. That's something we haven't talked about. So,
Yeah.
Ted, I can be reached at Trump Bedminster here in beautiful Bedminster, New Jersey. My phone number is 908-531-3637, or email briandobbypga@yahoo.com. Thanks again, Ted.
Always a pleasure, Brian. Thank you. And Paul?
Ted, thanks again so much. And Brian, you're welcome anytime to come down for a meditation session. I'm located in Little Silver, New Jersey, and if anybody ever wanted to come visit and see the Jersey Shore, it's lovely here in the summertime especially. My website is paulcaster, Kaster, golf.com. My number is 732-529-2222, and you can always reach me at info@paulcastergolf.com. Or my assistant. So thank you very much, Ted, and look forward to speaking to you guys soon.
All right. Well, thank you both, and have a great weekend, and much continued success as you get ready to start a new season, especially up there in the Northeast, and I look forward to having you guys join me again on another Coach's Corner panel. But thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Ted. Thanks. Good night.
All right, that was Brian Dobby and Paul Caster joining me on Coach's Corner panel. As I mentioned, John Hughes, unfortunately, wasn't able to join us tonight, but we'll get him the next time. All right, I'm going to take a short, quick break to hear a message from Golf Tips Magazine, and then I will be ready to bring on my very special guest tonight, Kraig Kann.
The following ad is sponsored by Golf Tips Magazine.
Are you tired of being short off the tee? And what about those 3 putts? Forget about it. It's time you got serious about your game. Golf Tips, the most in-depth magazine in the industry. For over 30 years, Golf Tips has delivered expert content such as the latest golf instruction from America's top pros, simple-to-follow practice and game improvement drills, fitness and mental game tips, equipment, training aids, accessory and apparel reviews, golf destinations and travel tips for every budget, and so much more. Don't miss a single issue. Go to golftipsmag.com and subscribe today.
All right, I'm very excited to be joined by my special guest this evening, Kraig Kann. Most of you may remember him from his days on the Golf Channel. He was a broadcaster there for, I think, about 17 years. He is now the founder of the Kann Advisory Group. In addition to that, he's also an executive branding and presentation skills coach, offering corporate keynotes, workshops, and webinars. And he's also an award-winning and best-selling author, hosts currently of SiriusXM and Tracks to Success podcast. And as I mentioned, he's also a network TV broadcaster. We'll just wait. He's going to be joining us momentarily, but very, very excited to have him join us. And while I wait for him to officially come on board, in fact, here he is now, so let me bring him out. Good evening, Kraig, and welcome to Golf Talk Live.
Hey, good to be with you. Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it. How you all doing?
I'm doing very well. I appreciate it, Kraig. Thank you for joining me tonight. And I'm really looking forward to this. I've been a big fan of yours. I've watched you over the years doing a variety of different things. And obviously, I remember you from the, not to date myself, but I remember you from the Golf Channel when you served there for many years as one of the broadcasters, and always enjoyed your commentary and your reports and so forth. So big fan of yours. But I want to dial back a little bit because I know we want to obviously talk about the Kann Advisory Group. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But I just want to sort of go back a little bit, if you wouldn't mind. And what was it about golf that initially appealed to you? What was it about that, and when did you first sort of get bitten by the bug?
Well, first off, let me just say this. The fact that you said you're a big fan, and whether you date me or not, going back that many years, I'm grateful and really thankful that you would have me on and still care. You know, I mean, it's been a while. I was there from 1995 until 2011, and one of the original 6 on-air personalities in the studio. So I've got a very fond recall and memory of my days at Golf Channel. There's no way that I'm sitting here talking to you, if not for my Golf Channel days. There's no way there's a Kann advisory group, honestly, if not for my career at the Golf Channel and where it led me. And so all those things kind of tie together, and that's the beauty of it. So I truly appreciate that. Very kind of you. As far as, where I got the bug, I'm going to go back. I'm going to pull a Tiger Woods from his speech at the World Golf Hall of Fame and say, I'm going to go retro on you. And say that I'm going to go back to my days in like junior high, 7th, 8th grade and into early high school. My grandfather helped teach me the game along with my dad, and there was a par 3 course in Chicago that I used to play all the time, and that's where I really started having a good time with it. I did not play high school golf. I played football, basketball, and baseball, and yet in college, a bunch of my buddies in my fraternity were golfers, and I had my clubs. That was my high school graduation gift, and so I played a little bit on the side when I wasn't going to parties at my fraternity, and doing the other things. And
right.
When I left Missouri and the journalism school, my first job there was in Columbus, Georgia, and that's not all that far away from Callaway Gardens, where the PGA Tour had an event. And then I went from there to Fort Myers, Naples, Florida, and there was a Champions Tour event down there for a number of years, still is down there. And then I went to Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Michigan, and there was a Champions Tour event there. So I was very into covering golf. I had a lot of it, in my back pocket, so to speak, in my resume tape and whatnot of things that I'd covered, and that helped me land the Golf Channel job as a reporter and an on-air host there at the earliest time of the Golf Channel days. So I really had the bug, if I'm honest. When I was younger in high school, I really enjoyed the par 3 course and playing in suburban Chicago, and I just took it from there. I'm not saying I'm a great player. My best handicap ever was a 4.7. My son actually asked me that question today, ironically enough. But I've always enjoyed the game. Obviously, you have to do what I've done.
Yeah, for sure. And it's always interesting. I always enjoy hearing, somebody's journey, if you will, in golf. I mean, obviously I teach golf, and besides doing what I'm doing here. And I've always enjoyed that. And, when I was younger, you always sort of fantasize. I grew up, I'm 58, so that gives you, next week actually, gives you an idea of what range I'm in. So I grew up, watching the Nicklases and the Palmers and the, Gary Player and that sort of thing. And you always kind of fantasize about, boy, I wish I could battle it out with those guys out in the golf course, but it just wasn't in the cards for me. And I was always a good, I always considered myself a good teacher in the sense that no matter what it was I was doing, I was always able to articulate the points that I needed to help somebody else learn. So, very early, and I'm going to digress here for a second and get off of myself, but basically that's what led me down the path that I am now.
Yeah.
And I had mentors and that as I was growing up, as I'm sure you did. So I'm curious, did you have a personal and or professional mentor, and who were they, and what did they do to inspire you to become who you are today?
Well, it's interesting that you would ask that question. When I was in Fort Myers, and not that this gentleman would be listening, but I was working at Wink TV, the CBS affiliate down there. And, I covered football and college football, the NFL with the Buccaneers and the Dolphins and whatnot. But Nolan Hankey was the PGA Tour professional down in Fort Myers at that time and won 3 times on the PGA Tour. And his teacher was a guy by the name of Mike Calbot, C-A-L-B-O-T. And at the TV station that I worked at, Mike had a segment on each week called The Golf Doctor. And he would do golf tips. And my job as the number 3 sports guy on that staff, I was a reporter, but I was also the videographer, was to go shoot these tips and produce them for air on the affiliate TV station, the CBS affiliate WINK-TV. So I was down there with Mike, every week, shooting video tips, and Nolan would come out there every now and again. And I got lessons from Mike, and he worked on my game a little bit and took a liking to me, and we became friends. And to this day, we still keep in touch. I really found myself enamored at that time by trying to get better, and finding ways that I could play the game and play this course or that course, and all the guys that were kind of in that market at the time. We played some golf together, and then same thing when I got to Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Michigan. You want to talk about a state that has great golf? I mean, everybody thinks Florida or Arizona or California or Texas or whatever, but Michigan has so many great golf courses, and I would play all the time in Kalamazoo. In fact, the other sportscaster at the station that I worked at, his name was John Koch, and we were there at the CBS affiliate there. We created in West Michigan the Coke and Kann Fantasy 18 golf holes, and it was 18 holes from 18 different golf courses.
Wow.
And it had to add up to 72, and we took par fours, par threes, par fives, and the great thing about it was all these courses, fell in love with the concept too because they got publicity, and we actually made a scorecard and printed it, and then had it at all the golf courses in the area so people could go, wow, we're playing this little par 3 at Lake Doster was the name of that course, and it was one of the holes on the Fantasy 18, and then on Solstice, the longest day of the year. We played, no joke, all 18 holes in one day. Now, these are holes all over West Michigan. We had to rent we got a limo, and they picked us up at about 4 o'clock in the morning, and we started in Benton Harbor, Michigan, and teed off on the first hole at 6 a.m. or whatever. We did live reports for the noon news, the 5 o'clock, the 6 o'clock, and we wrapped it up at 11 o'clock at night with our last hole of the day, and lo and behold, no joke on this story, the sprinklers went off while we were live on the air at 11 o'clock at night, and it was kind of fitting. So, we still talk about that stuff, but, I'm just saying I played a lot of golf in Michigan and really fell in love with the sport then.
Yeah, and there's some beautiful courses up there. A lot of people, obviously the people that have played golf for any length of time are familiar with the Michigan area, but there are some beautiful tracks. And just beautiful countryside as well. And, because it's a shorter season, obviously, than what we would have here in Florida or other parts, you don't think of it as much. And, there's beautiful lakes and there's so many other things to do up there. But Michigan has really come in its own over the years as a really a great golf destination. So I concur. And that's really an interesting that would be a great a guy's challenge, if you will, to do exactly what you did, is just to, string some holes together and get. And there's actually a book, and I'm going to have to get the information. I'm going to paraphrase here, but there was a book that was written. I had a guest on years ago that wrote it, and I can't think of his name off the top. But the book was called King of Clubs, and it was a gentleman out of Chicago, very wealthy gentleman, and he actually did something similar. He actually hopped on, of course, his private jet, and he flew to several golf courses in the same day. I think he hit 7 or 8 golf courses in the same day and played a handful of holes each one, hopped on the plane and went on. And he did something and wrote it was in this book. And I'll have to get the information. You might want to look it up because I think you'd find it very interesting, but certainly a lot of similarities. Kraig, I want to get your thoughts on today's game. What do you think of the current game that we're seeing out there today? Both the men's and the women's. And I just have one thought I want to inject into this before you answer. Do you think the men's game has become too much of a power game?
I'll start with the last question first, and my answer to that is yes. The other night on my radio show on Sirius XM, PGA Tour Radio, it's called Connected with Kraig Kann, Tuesday night, 6 to 8, shameless plug. That's Eastern time.
Yeah, that's okay. Go ahead.
I was actually talking about this because, Tiger was being inducted into the World Golf Hall of Fame, and I am obviously a huge Tiger Woods fan for all that he's accomplished in the game, and having covered him in the game, and I can tell you stories about that too. But my whole thing is I feel like he deserves his rightful place at top the PGA Tour win list. I hope he gets one more. Now, how's he going to do that? I don't think he's going to do that playing today's game like everybody's playing it. I don't think he can hit it far enough. I don't think his body can handle that. I don't think his leg will be able to handle that. I think he's going to have to do it on different types of golf courses. Now, having said that, my favorite courses have been and will always be courses that most people don't think are long bomb golf courses. I'm not a huge fan of Torrey Pines. It doesn't mean I don't like going there or that venue. But it's not my favorite PGA Tour event by any stretch. I always, when I was covering golf, wanted to go to Milwaukee, to Brown Deer Park, because I thought it was an awesome venue. I'm from Chicago, so I love Cog Hill, which wasn't the longest golf course in the world. I'm a big fan of Harbortown Golf Links. I love Colonial Country Club. I think Hartford is a wonderful venue. And we could go on and on down the list of golf courses that I believe the PGA Tour should never lose off their schedule. And I think Tiger would do himself a great service and everybody else a great service by going back to some of the venues that gave him a first shot on the PGA Tour with sponsor invites. Play some of the courses that he might not necessarily have put on his schedule back in the day and try to win on those tracks. I mean, look, he could get Stinger 3-woods or all around Harbortown off the tee or irons or whatever he needs to do. Same thing with Colonial. Shape his shot and have a chance to win a golf tournament. I don't think he's going to do it at some of the other places. I mean, obviously Pebble Beach is not a long golf course. It plays longer when it's wet. But you get my point. I'm not a huge fan of the bomb and gouge and all that sort of good stuff. I don't enjoy that. I don't love hearing when they all say he had to drive 353 yards. That doesn't get me excited to watch golf. I like shot making. I always have. I love watching guys with great swings. You go back to players like Tom Purtzer, or you go look at Steve Elkinson and good golf swings. Tom Weiskopf back in the day. Those are the types of players that I've always enjoyed. David Toms comes to my mind as well. And that's the type of golf that I enjoy watching, always have, always will. You asked me about the PGA Tour and the state of the game in men's and women's golf. I'll answer it this way. The world ranking right now has 5 players at the top in the men's game that are under the age of 30. And John Rahm, Colin Morikawa, Victor Hovland, Scheffler's in there, and why am I drawing a blank on the 4th player? But you get my point. These guys are young. They're great. We are watching a different era. Now, many people would have said the game's never going to be the same without Tiger Woods. It's no good anymore. I actually believe it's never been better. I love the volatility. When all of a sudden Justin Thomas is, nearing 10 in the world, and Dustin Johnson's, I think, number 9 right now. I think JT's number 8. That says something about the skill level that's in the game of golf at this current time. I love that. I love the fact that we don't know who's going to be number 1. This week alone, Rahm was like, he had no idea that he could be unseated at number 1 until somebody told him. And that's great. That's fantastic. I love that. And so I'm a big fan of where the PGA Tour is right now. Look, I wish Ricky Fowler would play better golf, and I wish he was still relevant. It's hard for me to believe that he's, not in the mix. A guy like Jordan Spieth has to work harder to stay relevant. I mean, the PGA Tour is in a point right now where a spot in the top 10 in the world golf ranking and a PGA Tour card alone is on loan. It is on loan. You borrow it. And you have to work hard. Nothing is a given, and you get what you earn. And that's just the way it is. So I'm a big fan of where the PGA Tour is right now. I love the stories. I love the different winners that we get from week to week. I don't really care who plays what week and when they take weeks off, and this field's weak and this one's strong. I've never bought into all that sort of nonsense because when the top guys don't play for a given week, we seem to get the best stories. And I love that. As far as the women's game is concerned, look, I think I spent 5 years as Chief Communications Officer at the LPGA after I left my TV career. And I spent a lot of time with the ladies and the top female, in my opinion, athletes in sport. And they are the best ambassadors of their brand in all of sport. The only issue they've ever had is that they haven't had a big enough platform or a tall enough mountain to climb to the top of to shout the message about all the great things they do, the skill they have, and all of that. And that's one of the things that I spent 5 years working with them on, with how to tell their story and how to promote themselves and also the tour game. I think I have a lot of friends that are on that tour. Stacey Lewis was on my show recently, and I'm a huge fan. Suzanne Pedersen's one of my best friends in the game of golf. Flew me to Oslo twice to MC her charity event, and I love the way they approach it. Their golf swings are great. I mean, if you spend any time around Inbee Park, and for those people who are like, oh, there are too many international players or too many from Asia that are on the tour, let me tell you something. I used to do press conferences and choreograph press conferences to bring them up there to show off how well they speak English and how dedicated they are to the tour and to living in the United States. The thing that people don't realize and that I think they take for granted is, for example, if you go back to the Olympics in 2016, Lydia Ko won a medal, Inbee Park won the gold, and Shen Feng won the bronze. All right? Those are three different countries. It speaks volumes to the world game that we're dealing with. But I will tell you that if I put 3 Asian-born players, 3 Korean-born players, or from Taiwan up there, Yanni Sen being another one that comes to mind of somebody that I spent some time with, they speak great English, and they don't get credit. And if you took about 5 American players and said, go live in Korea for 5 years and make that your homeland, I highly doubt that they would really take the time to learn the language. Now, I could be wrong, and I'm not trying to, throw fire on American players. That's not my point.
Right.
What I'm doing is elevating the stature of the Asian-born players who don't get enough credit for the great things that they do in the United States and making the LPGA their home tour. And I'm a big, big fan. We can be fans of Lexi. We can be fans of, the Corda sisters and all of that. Danielle Kang, wonderful. All of them are wonderful. But we have to give credit to the players from other countries.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, we see, and I think that's why even more so on the women's tour, we're seeing such an explosion over the last several years of international players. And the one thing that I've always noticed, and I'm not going to get into specifics, but the one thing I always noticed with U.S. players over past years, and I'm talking women's only, for a while there were a number that were more, and actually Nicholas actually pointed this out one time in an interview. And, again, he didn't get into specifics, but he said, when he was coming up, he went out on the golf course and proved himself first before he became a big name. And he said that he noticed that a lot of the younger coming up, and he was referring to the women's tour, that they were going out, it was more about the brand. It was more about developing a brand and becoming known for, social media presence and so on and so forth before they even won a tournament. So it was kind of like the reverse, and he kind of pointed that out one time in an interview, and I started really thinking about that, and it was something that I noticed with a few of the players. And again, I'm not going to name names because I don't want to go down that path, but and I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but do you agree a little bit that maybe for a while, not all of them, but for a while there was sort of a trend where it was more about let me get out there, let me market myself, but I haven't really done anything on the golf course yet. What do you think about that? Is that correct, do you think, in some fashion, or am I off base?
Well, I'll go ahead and name one player, and it's Ricky Fowler. But maybe that's the name, one of the names you were going to throw out. But I'm going to tell you this right now. I've spent a lot of time around Ricky Fowler when I was out there, and his agency was my agency for a while. Now, that has nothing to do with the comment I'm about to make, but you won't find a classier guy in professional golf than him. And I think his agents did a really good job of marketing him to a younger crowd to bring younger people into the game. It couldn't all be about Tiger Woods. The orange clothes, and the Puma, and all that sort of stuff was terrific. Has Ricky won enough? I don't know. That's debatable. It's not easy to win on the PGA Tour, period. Ricky's won the Players' Championship. Ricky's won some pretty big events. There was one year where he finished top 5 in all the majors, and he couldn't pull it off. He may never win one, or he may land one, and you just never know when it's going to happen. I sure hope he does, because I can't think of another guy. Like if I was going to, so you're speaking of brand. So I've had this conversation on my show too. So let's say that you can throw millions of dollars at only one PGA Tour player, and they're going to represent your brand for the next 5 to 10 years in professional golf. Just your logo is the only one on their clothing and everything else, and you're going all in, all your chips to the middle of the table on one player. Now, I will tell you that it would, for me, right now, be Colin Morikawa. Having said that, if I was doing it a while back, it would have been Ricky Fowler. And if I was going to parade 3 players around to be spokespeople for the game, for the PGA Tour right now, I would still put Ricky Fowler among my top 3, along with Morikawa. I'd probably put Rory McIlroy on that list as well and say, go for it. You know, that's how I feel about, you know, look, Jordan Spieth is terrific when he's sitting there talking to people about the game. Adam Scott is a wonderful ambassador for the game. There are so many of them. Do they need to build their brands? Hey, look, if we're all about golf, we can be critical if we want to, but do you feel like some of the PGA Tour guys, and I'm not throwing any shade here on Kevin Durant, but I'm just going to use his name, the NBA and Major League Baseball and the NFL, they do not market the league, they market the stars.
Right.
Now, the difference is that they belong to teams, and golfers belong only to themselves. They are not paid by the PGA Tour as you know, employees. So it is up to themselves to build their own brand, to create their own following, to do what they have to do. So when people, you know, get critical of that, I say, hey, hold on, let's hit the pause button on that, and let's imagine that you're going out there making a living. I'll talk about myself on this, okay? There could be people that say, hey, good Lord, Kraig Kann, you know, Kann Advisory Group, he's speaking in this town, and he's doing a keynote here, and he's got a workshop that he's doing here, and he was just with this group, and last night he was at Stetson University speaking, and today he was at Full Sail University speaking, and he's got pictures all over the place. Well, you want to know something? If I don't find a way to toot my own horn or put myself out there as to who I'm, you know, speaking with or what organization brought me in, nobody else is going to do that for me. And the only way that I get a check or the next client is word-of-mouth marketing. So I need to put myself out there. Now, I have to do it strategically. I can't just talk all about me. I try to talk about the value that I bring to others and put them out there for what they say that my workshop does for their organization or my talk has done for them collectively in a room. That's different, and I have to do it. So for anybody that says, boy, he's out there all the time, he pushes himself, hey, look, you know, that's how I make my living, and I don't have a $4 million marketing budget. I got to do it on my own. So I don't begrudge these guys for doing that at all.
Yeah, and I think I agree. I mean, I think, you know, you have to do what you know, what you feel is right for your brand or your personality, if you will. My perspective from this was I was just wondering, when you're comparing it to some of the European players or some of the Asian players, if that in retrospect, if some of the American players, an example, and there are others too, but if they were more focused on brand building than actually winning golf tournaments. And that's what the point that Nicholas kind of referred to a little bit, is he was concerned that maybe they were more emphasized on building their name and their brand than actually going out and trying to, you know, get the whole. That's what I was getting at. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with what you just said.
Here's the other part of that. If we took all the American players and sent them overseas to Europe and said, you know, you're over there, I don't know that they'd be as big on building the brand because it's a cultural thing. That's not as big of a deal over there as it is in the United States. Yeah. So, you know, you can say that Tommy Fleetwood isn't doing a good enough job building his brand here in the United States, and he ought to try to win more golf tournaments, or, you know, you're going to slam, you know, Jordan Spieth or some of the others for signing big contracts and not doing the same. I think we have to look at where they're playing, what they're doing, and take the bigger picture of it. I've got no problem of it. The bottom line about brand is that the more you share, the bigger the brand becomes. And the less you share, the more anonymous you're going to remain. So if you aren't winning golf tournaments or top 10ing or top 25, you know, whatever it might be, you're not going to get a whole lot of notoriety. It's interesting because this past week, the main tour guest on my show was Charles Howell III. And Charles and I have been friends for a long time. He's one of my favorite people in the game of golf. He told some amazing stories over a half hour. I actually blew through my stop sign at the bottom of the hour and went an extra 8 minutes, and because he was that good. Now, Charles Howell III, when I was promoting the show and saying, here's who's coming on Connected this week, he doesn't even have a Twitter handle. So, you know, but he's won about 50 or 60 or 70. I mean, I don't even know how many $1 million. You can look it up during our commercial break or whatever we're doing if we're just talking. He is amazing, and all of that. And so everybody does it differently. Everybody does it differently, and that is totally, totally fine. You don't have to love this player or that player. If they don't win, chances are they're not going to stay out there very long either. So it's you know, you're not going to have to worry about it too much.
Yeah, and it's definitely a different time too. I mean, you know, back again, putting him on the point here, you know, going back to Nicholas and Palmer and that generation, they didn't have the onslaught of social media. They didn't have the ability to, you know, push themselves out there in the same arena that we can now. So really their only way was to win golf tournaments, to be on television, to be in front of the camera more often than the guy beside them. So they really didn't have a lot of other avenues. And, of course, they got into golf course design and you know, Arnie, of course, did all kinds of commercials for Pennzoil and other products out there. So that's how he got in front of the camera in addition to his game. But interesting. I was just curious, an interesting perspective. All right, so you did a great lead in there
I highly
a few
doubt,
minutes
by
back.
the way, that Jack Nicklaus is I highly doubt that Jack is sitting around. I know he tweeted out, you know, when Tiger was inducted, and I know he tweets out about this and that, but I highly doubt he's saying, hey, Barbara, hang on a second, I got to fire out this tweet, you know, before we go do whatever. I think somebody's probably handling that for him and saying, what do you think, Jack? And then he tells them. But you're right. You nailed it. It's a different era. That was not around then. And neither were cell phones, and neither were, you know, YouTube channels and all the other different things that we have. So it's just different.
Yeah, I mean, the game is pretty much coming online now. You know, we had a guest, Kelly Brook, on another show I do Tuesday mornings with Cindy Miller called The Women of Golf, and we interview a lot of the players, not just LPGA, but Epson Tour now and others. And, you know, she talked about this very thing. She's a professional. She runs an operation up at Bethpage, and she was talking about this exact same thing about the onslaught of electronics and social media and all this sort of thing, and how, you know, companies like Topgolf and all these other entertainment value, if you will, products are coming on the market, and how it's really changing the game. And you're seeing a trend, actually for several years now, where the typical country club experience is getting smaller and smaller to the upcoming golfers. They don't care about that. They want to go out. They want to have fun. They want to be entertained. It's, you know, let's party, let's do whatever. And it's not that they don't enjoy playing golf, that they're not serious in some level, but they're not as serious as maybe 20, 30 years ago as players coming up. And I'm not talking professional, but I'm just talking, you know, your everyday weekend warriors. So it is a much different market in a way. And just look at, even with this pandemic, the number of people that have come out to this game that never touched a golf club in their lives are suddenly being introduced to something because they had no choice. They were either stuck inside watching Netflix for the night, or they get out in the golf course and tried to learn the new game. And the numbers don't lie. I mean, people are coming out, and it's whether or not the industry is going to be forward enough thinking to say, what are we going to do to keep these players here? We can't just keep doing with the status quo. So, yeah, there's a lot of great points there, and I agree wholeheartedly. I think you have to brand and market yourself in such a way that people remember who you are, because if you're not going to win a lot of events, you may not be around too long. All right, I want to move on because I know we've got to talk about...
Let me just say this real quick. Let me give you 20 seconds on one statement. There's a difference in being known and chasing the idea of being known, and a difference in chasing the idea of being knowable or noteworthy. And being known is just how many followers can I possibly get. Being knowable means you bring value and you bring something to the table that makes you unique and different. And I used to tell the LPGA players when they would ride in to the press room and say, I shot 66, I'm really excited to do these interviews, top of the leaderboard. And I said, guess what? I hate to tell you this, nobody cares. And I remember a player saying, wait a second, what are you talking about? I said, let me tell you, you've got your name on your bag. My job is to help you figure out what your story is to make you noteworthy, so that tomorrow when a family comes out there with 2 kids, why are they going to take that tee sheet and go follow you for 25 minutes? What value will you bring to the golf course? What memory will you make? What will you do to create a connection with a fan, whether it's a picture, an autograph, or whatever else? What is your story? Who are you? Why should we pay attention? Why should we care? That's what you need to figure out, because the 66 goes away in a heartbeat. Nobody remembers that, and nobody really truly cares about the 2 birdies you made at 13 and 14. They want to know about you, the person, and that's what makes you relevant.
Right. No, you're exactly right. It's funny, just real quick, and then I want to move on for you. I was at the Q Series for the LPGA this year. It was down here in Alabama. And I walked around, and I can't think of the young lady's name, but she's #1 in Japan right now. And again, she's just presented herself in such a way that, I mean, there were hordes of people following her around. She wasn't even near the top of the event and working towards her card, but she had an entourage of photographers from Japan that were following around, and then the fans were following around that were out there, watching these girls, battle out for their cards. And it was just interesting because it goes to exactly what you're talking about is even though she wasn't near the top, she had a presence out there that people wanted to follow her. She was exciting. She was exciting to watch. And, obviously she had media from back home that were coming out to follow her. But it was just interesting. It was kind of an interesting, kind of goes to your point. All right, I want to talk about, obviously, the Kann Advisory Group. And first, let's talk about some of the things. What was your overall vision? Why did you – I mean, you've done so many other things. You've been a broadcaster. You do, obviously, your radio programs. You're an award-winning author. Was this something on your mind early in your career to develop this platform and get out there and actually help other people?
So that's such a great question. And I could go in 20 different directions on this. I'm going to go back and I'm going to tell the story of how it all became true. Number one, I wrote about it in the book, and the book is Can You Get Our Attention, which came out in 2021. I started it in 2019. Back in 2008 and 9, the Golf Channel changed course, and the market changed. We all know that. There were a lot of things in the economy back then, and Golf Channel was merging with Comcast and NBC, and all that stuff started happening. And a lot of people were being let go. And the long story short of it is, two things happened. Number one, my contract was up that year. And instead of signing a 4-year contract, which was offered to me 2 years prior, I signed a 2-year contract. And my contract came up at the wrong time. So all of a sudden I was in peril, and other people were let go. And I was told I was free to look. And people don't ever know that, but I did write about it in the book. And and it was a bit jarring. It was a bit scary. And I remember sitting in the studio during the John Deere Classic around that time. And I said, I got to think about this right now. I've got some changes to make for me. I'm either going to end up staying at the Golf Channel, which I did ultimately for 2 more years, but or I'm going to go do some other things. And I started writing a blog. And the blog was about all the things that I believed I had value in sharing my concepts, my ideas on, be it strategic communications, be it media coaching, be it media, be it social media, be it, presentation skills. All those different things were things that I had ideas on. And I would sit down and I would handwrite 140-character little sayings and quotes that became my own. And they were tweetable, obviously. So anyway, I started writing these blogs, and every blog, I wrote about 150 blogs, and every one of them was the potential chapter in a book. At that exact same time, I decided, the Golf Channel kept me, by the way. I ended up staying as an independent contractor. I was no longer a full-blown employee starting in 2009, and I only worked 4 days a week. That was the contract I signed, and I was paid by the day. So what's weird about it is they brought me back, but they said, you're not a full-time employee. And I ended up having 4 days on the work schedule, not 5, and I couldn't go to the Christmas party, and I didn't have benefits. Now, I said, well, what am I doing? Well, you're our main anchor. Now, think about how that really makes sense. It really doesn't make sense, but that's the landscape that we were in. Things were changing. Okay, fine. So I had the best 2 years of my career from 2009 to 2011 on television. Having said that, I had 1 day a week to play with because I only worked 4, and I started a business called HTK Media Consulting. Have the knowledge, HTK. That was my thing. It was also the initials of my kids, Haley, Trent, and Kendall. And I felt like if it ever became something, they would know that they were there in my mind when I started it. Now, I didn't get rich over the first year or year and a half, but I made about $55,000 in just being able to control my own schedule, speak, consult, do different things 1 day a week, and doing things for people. What it told me was, if this ever has to be my thing, I think I can do this. All right? So keep that in mind. I had 2 great years. Then all of a sudden, Mike Wan gets named commissioner of the LPGA. He comes and he does an interview, and they say, Kraig, you're interviewing Mike. I interview Mike in 2010, and he's on his media tour. And at the end of it, I give him my HTK media card, business card, not my Golf Channel business card. I said, Mike, if you ever need any help on the consulting side, I've been play-by-play guy for LPGA. I've covered every tournament. I'd love to help you, share some things, maybe a media coach, whatever you need. He goes, I'm good right now. What I didn't know is he tracked me for the next year. And lo and behold, in 2011, I got a phone call from him about during the U.S. Open when Rory McIlroy won at Congressional. And he said, Kraig, this is way out of left field. Would you be interested in talking to me about being my chief communications officer? That's where that was born. So from 2009 to 11, I rebranded myself on the side 1 day a week and then took the job as LPGA's chief communications officer. Most people are like, why would you do that? You're hosting live from and the main studio host. But I felt like jobs in the C-suite, and it wasn't director of communications, it was chief communications officer, sitting in board meetings, having a real voice, traveling the world, helping players, building the awareness for the organization. Those things don't fall in the laps of guys that wear makeup and read teleprompters. So I felt like I needed to take that opportunity and run with it. So where does this all fit into me starting Kann Advisory Group? I spent 5 years at the LPGA building presentations, doing consulting, if you will, with tournaments, helping players build their brands, teaching people in our organization how to share a story, present in front of a group, own a room, understand media, all the different things that I was able to do. And after 5 years in the Olympics in 2016, which I'm grateful for the opportunity to have been on the communications committee for the Rio Games, I said, this is the time. There wasn't much more for me to do at the LPGA. It was a fabulous 5-year run. I'm not talking to you here today if not for that. I don't have Kann Advisory Group if not for my 5 years as Chief Communications Officer. There's no way. So I'm grateful to Mike Wan for that opportunity forever, and I loved being a part of that organization. But it gave me the confidence that I could go out there and do my thing. And so Kann Advisory Group was basically a rebrand of HTK Media at the end of 2016 to where I said, you know what, I'm going to start taking my Power of Presentation seminar, my this seminar, my that seminar, and I'm going to start building content that I can share with organizations and go out and do keynotes that I can now get paid for about how our careers don't go down a straight line. You need to be able to pivot. You need to figure out what your next might be before you actually need to have a next. And you need to go ahead and find your true passion, your true calling. And so that's kind of where it all started. And I built everything around. If you look at the logo of Kann Advisory Group, go to kannadvisory.com, you'll see the Elevate and the Mountain Peak. And that's really where this all started. And everything I do is about elevating people, elevating brands, elevating events, elevating awareness. And so I've been incredibly fortunate. You know, I did a keynote for SAP that got me off and running. KPMG then brought me in to do a bunch of work with their executives in communications on executive presence and presentation skills. I then did a big workshop for Diamond Resorts before they're now Hilton Grand Vacations. They merged. And Mike Flasky brought me in, and there were 30 executives. I did one. It went swimmingly well for 8 hours, and the next, it was like 2 days later, they hired me to do 12 more. And then the next year they hired me to do 12 more. And I was off to the races at that point. And now I've got people like Transamerica and Accenture and Gallagher. And, you know, we can come up with all these companies. Titleist is a big client of mine. Tons in the space of golf because I love working with major golf organizations. And I do speaking for PGA of America sections. And I, you know, just did a big talk for the Golf Course Owners Association, all their leaders and CEOs and presidents out in Monterey last year. One talk leads to four. If you do a great job, you know, and you provide value, word-of-mouth marketing carries a long way. And that's really what's happened for me. I started with zero. I really did. I started with zero, and now I'm as busy as I need to be, and I'm very, very fortunate. I'm not rich, but I'm rich with opportunity and relationships, and I'm really proud of who I've been able to help and what I've been able to do as far as making an impact on people.
Well, and you know, the interesting thing, Kraig, is this. I look at someone's wealth as not so much what they necessarily have in their bank account, but the satisfaction they get from what they're doing with their lives. And obviously, you can hear in your voice when, you know, I was listening. I listen very, very intently when my guests come on the show to things that they say and things that they don't say. And you know, you can hear the passion in your voice that you're very, and it's not a pride of, well, hey, I did this for who and whatever, but it's just that you enjoy being able to take people, even in powerful positions, and show them a way that's going to impact them, not only personally, but also obviously impact their businesses. And so it brings me to this question is, what do you think, based on all the experience, not just as a broadcaster, but moving up into what you're doing now, what are most people missing when it comes to preparing for their careers, or is it the lack of preparation?
Well, I'll second guess a lot of things about everything that I do, but one thing I will not second guess is preparedness. Nobody's going to out-prepare me or outwork me. Now, this may sound funny, but, you know, I do these workshops, and I've got keynotes in Nebraska over the last couple of weeks, and I was in front of a group in Myrtle Beach last week. I'm headed to San Diego next week or the week after, and I don't rehearse my talks. I don't do a lot of rehearsals. I really believe that when I build my slide content or my presentations, I think about a couple of things. I think about the impact of each slide that might be behind me on the audience in front of me. I think about the impact of that and what they'll feel, and I think about how I'll feel with that behind me. And so when I put it all together, I make sure that I have a story. I mean, what we're really doing when we speak in front of groups or when we coach people to learn how to present, we're coaching them to present the best of themselves. You know, I don't tell people I'm going to make you the best public speaker in the world. I can't do that. I'm not going to make you the best presenter in the world. I can't even make you the best blogger or the best podcast host in the world. But I can promise you that if you give me a day and a half or you come to my workshop, I'm going to set you well on your way to becoming your best presenter and your best public speaker, because I'm going to figure out what your inner genius is and what your strengths are. Most people aren't going to sign up for a class or a workshop on communication and presentation skills. They're afraid to get up in front of a room. They don't know how to own it, and they don't know where to begin. It's the number one fear among all Americans. And number two is death. So think about that. People would rather be buried underground than be standing above ground talking about the life they lived before they got buried underground. I mean, that's kind of the reality of it. My thing is I teach people to die for the opportunity, because some people never get it. But they have to figure out what their story is. We buy people before we buy products. We buy people before we buy brands. We buy people before we buy workshops or webinars or seminars. So I am, look, I don't have a master's degree, all right? I don't. But I do feel like I have one in people skills and communication and trying to make people feel good about what they do. And that's what I love to do. I love to get people up there in front of a room and figure out how they can become the best of themselves and learn to share their story and find the value in their story and how they can tie their personal story into the story of the organization. What I find is most companies do not have employees who understand the story of that organization. And the other problem is most organizations are focused on employees when they need to be focused on creating ambassadors. And ambassadors are the ones who can go wave a flag and understand the story and share that about the brand and then really make a difference. That's the deal. Too many people today are focused on making a paycheck instead of making a difference. And I try to change mindset, and I try to change the ability to present.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And you know, you talk about that your job is to engage, connect, and influence in a positive way, and more importantly, that delivers an emotional impact. And just like you were talking about with the slides behind you, is you're looking for the reaction of the people in front of you, because that gauges your way of responding. Because obviously, if they're got their hands or their head in their hands and they're falling asleep, it's not a matter of necessarily what you're saying is wrong, but it's not having an emotional impact with them. It's actually having a different reaction, and that's what you're looking for. Is you're essentially reading the room. Is you're looking to find out what it is that impacts them, what motivates them, and what gets them excited about what they're doing. And you're exactly right. I mean, sales, I always say to people, go and do and work in a sales environment for even just a couple of years and really get yourself out there, because you're exactly right what you said earlier. A lot of people have the number one fear is public speaking. What's interesting, and I'm going to ask you a question. I don't know whether this was applicable to you or not, but it was to me. I was always extremely shy when I was growing up. And I've often found, and again, I'm not propping myself up here, but I've often found that some of the people that ultimately became some of the most effective speakers or public personas, if you will, were people that came from the opposite, a very shy background. Were you very shy? Were you like that yourself? Or maybe you were different, but were you a shy individual growing up?
No. If anybody was listening that knew me as a kid, they'd start laughing right now, because I was the kid that was standing on the corner of my street telling them to get off my grass, and I wasn't even 70 yet. I was always a yapper. My parents would have dinner parties with other couples, and I'd be the kid that would go out there and own the room when I was 6 or 8 or whatever it was. I tell the story in my book, and I tell it in my workshops, because I feel like if I'm going to tell them that they need to tell their story, I'm going to give them a little head start and share my own, and I do it in a way with some pictures behind me, and I'm the kid that at 8 years old knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a sportscaster. That's all I wanted. My parents gave me a tape recorder and a microphone, and I was up in my room in suburban Chicago. Orange shag carpeting, by the way, in that room, which was pretty cool. I made up play-by-play games of Bulls, Bears, Blackhawks, White Sox, all that sort of stuff. And I was that kid. If we're it doesn't matter if we're on the Golf Channel. It doesn't matter if we're doing a radio show. Our job is to keep people engaged. I've been in conferences with a lanyard on. I've sat in rooms where they brought in a speaker, or it was a career development day, and I left unfulfilled many times. And I always feel like when I'm looking at my audience, they're saying three things to themselves: so what, who cares, and what's in this for me? Because it's got to be about them. So whenever I'm doing a presentation, or whenever I'm teaching people how to own a room, or how to win the web, be it in a webinar, which is the new frontier, and I've got a whole seminar on that as well. We have to start with the audience forefront of our mind. I always begin everything with when they're gone. When they're gone, what will they say? What do I want them to say about what I've said? What do I want them to do after I'm done? Because they will say something about me. They will say something about the experience, and my job is to control the narrative. And I've got to make it about them. I've got to connect with them. So there's a quote that I got from a professor when I was in college at the University of Missouri, and it was in broadcast journalism school, and he was talking about the package that we would air on the TV channel, because we had KOMU, and you were on the news your senior year in college, the only school that owned and operated an affiliate TV station back then, which was pretty cool, and the reason I went to Missouri. But he always said, quote, "You can't preach to anybody unless you can get them into the church." Now think about that for a second. You might have the greatest podcast in the world, but if you don't have an audience, and your message is going nowhere. Now, I don't need 800 people in a room for me to be successful and have people create word-of-mouth marketing. I might only need 8 if I have the right 8. It's not the size of the room that matters. It's the size of your message. Now, I do not go and do a talk and just wing it. I work it, and I know exactly what I'm trying to accomplish. If you look at my website, if you know anything about what I do, you know I give out a green shoe, and there's a whole concept behind the green shoe. And somebody got a green shoe last night at Stetson University, and someone got a green shoe a couple of weeks ago in Lincoln, Nebraska, and someone got one in Myrtle Beach the other day, and somebody's going to get one in San Diego coming up, but they're going to earn it. And it's a whole mentality of how people stand out when they stand up. And look, I try to give corporate executives and teams and organizations a simple concept that they can grasp onto that will make their head spin for an hour or however long they're with me, but will get them to go out the door with actionable steps that they can change that will raise the economic value of the organization and themselves. And the last thing that I would say, you brought up sales. You know what? We're all in sales. You don't think I'm selling right now? I'm selling myself. I'm selling my information. I'm selling my theories. I'm selling my organization. You're selling your podcast. You're selling your knowledge on golf. We are all in sales. And it's really important that people adopt that thought process, because being able to sell yourself in a presentation way and owning communication, Warren Buffett says 50%, greatest way to add 50% of value, economic value, to your career is to be proficient and really good at communication and public speaking. It's crazy. It's crazy. The Dale Carnegie Institute says that 85% of our wealth comes from human engineering, quote unquote, meaning how are you when it comes to communication and being able to deliver. Only 15% of our wealth comes from our knowledge, the things we went to school for, our training. It's all about how we connect with people, period.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And, you talk about you're only as good as your story and the way you present it. And you're exactly right. If you go back in time to some of the early pioneers in business, most of them didn't even finish high school. So it's not a matter, and I'm not criticizing anybody, by the way, that's listening. Don't send me hate mail and saying, well, what are you saying? We don't need to go to college or high school or what have you. No, I'm not saying that. I mean, there's value and benefits in all of that. But some of the earlier pioneers, especially here in the United States, many of them never graduated high school. But they were able to communicate whatever their message may be, and they were able to tell their story. I mean, look at Henry Ford as an example. I mean, the Ford company went bankrupt several times, and look at them today. I mean, they're so. I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, I agree with you.
I'm sorry. I thought you were going to. I'm sorry.
Exactly what you're saying. Look, we fight for business cards and titles, and everybody's all into all that. And I can call myself whatever I want. I run my own business. I put managing director. I thought CEO sounded really, snobbish, and president. Who cares? I mean, they know I founded it. It's got my name on it. So, what we need is everybody to wake up in the morning, on their card it should say entrepreneur. And what do I mean by that? I mean that we need to adopt an entrepreneurial mindset, that we're going to be able to take an idea, have no fear that it might fail, and be able to push it across the finish line and get people to pay attention to it. That's tied to my book, Can You Get Our Attention? It's a funny thing, when I wrote the book, and I had an agent help me with the pitch. I wrote the pitch. He put it out there. We sent it to 30-some publishers. You don't know if anybody's going to say yes, right? You just don't.
Right.
And 8 out of 31 or whatever said, we're all in. We narrowed it to 4. We interviewed the 4. I was thrilled with 8. I couldn't even believe it. And the fact that we were talking to 4 was mind-boggling. We settled on 1. And Kathy Tietz is her name, Headline Books. And they took a flyer on me, and she was in love with my story and what I could potentially do. She liked my pitch. And she told me, now, as far as your title, just write the book. I go, no. I have the title. She said, no, you don't. I said, yes, I do. It's called Broadcasting Your Story. She said, write the book. That won't be the title of your book. I go, no, it will be Broadcasting Your Story. I'm telling you right now. She goes, just write the book and then get back to me. I wrote the book. I called her up. I said, Kathy, I'm wrong. You're right. It's not Broadcasting Your Story. It's called Can You Get Our Attention? She loved it, and the rest is history. Top 25 Amazon bestseller, and it ended up winning awards at Book of the Year at the New York Book Festival, San Francisco Book Festival, and Paris Book Festival, and top 5 international book awards. I mean, like things I never thought would happen. But the premise of the book is, we live in a distracted society, Ted. I mean, like everybody is yapping. Everybody's talking. Can you actually have something worthy of people's attention? Can you have a message worth following? Can you get people emotionally connected to hear what you have to say and go tell somebody else? I mean, that's what it really boils down to. And so Can You Get Our Attention is really based on different strategies and things that I talk about, whether you use the platform of media coaching or social media or strategic branding or strategic communications, all the different things that I'm an alleged expert in. These are my teachings, but then storytelling is huge. And I felt like if I'm going to coach people on the value of sharing your story, I better share my own. So I weave my own story, start to finish, all the successes, but all the failures, because we learn a lot more from our failures. I guarantee you, your greatest successes in your life, personal, professional, did not come from inside your comfort zone. They come from outside our comfort zone. And so people need to understand that there's great value in failing. And that goes back to the entrepreneur thing. You've got to be able to get an idea and move it across the finish line and get other people to buy in.
No, you're exactly right. And what a great way to end the program. Kraig, I want to thank you, and I want to give that website out. It's kannadvisory.com. It's Kann advisory.com. You can get all of Kraig's contact information there. Any final thoughts before we close out?
I'll leave you with this. I get to do a lot of really cool things, be it workshops, interviews, keynotes. And a lot of people I hear say, I have to go deliver a talk. I have to go deliver a speech. I have to go to a meeting. I work with a lot of people on shifting their mindset to be able to say, I get to. And so what I'm going to say to you is that some people might say, Kraig had to go do this podcast tonight or this interview tonight. And I'll say, no, I got to do it. And so for that, I thank you. I appreciate the time. The fact that you cared enough to reach out to me and book me as a guest means a lot. I'm grateful, and I thank you so much. It means a lot.
Well, I appreciate it, and I've enjoyed listening to, and you're exactly right in everything that you shared with the audience tonight. And I know that they've enjoyed it, and will continue to enjoy it. And I hope you'll come back and join me again on a future show. We'll set that up at a later time, but I'd love to have you come back on, and you can share some Tiger stories and maybe some other things. We'll talk a little more golf too. But thank you, Kraig. I appreciate you, and thanks to John Decker for helping to arrange this. I know you're familiar with him, and I appreciate so a quick shout out to him for connecting us and that. But thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate our discussion tonight, and again, you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And for those who follow on Twitter, it's @KraigCann with 2 Ks, and hit me up, and we'll create some following for this podcast. You did a great job. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thanks, and have a great weekend.
You got it.
Bye-bye. All right, that was my very special guest, Kraig Kann. Again, you can go to kannadvisory.com as his website, all of his contact information there. Great individual, obviously has done a lot in his career and wants to help all of you out there, especially you entrepreneurs out there that want to get your mind in a right mode, if you will, to succeed and be successful, not only as a business person, but as an individual. This is the guy that's going to do it for you. So go to kannadvisory.com. That's Kann advisory.com. All right. I appreciate you guys for tuning in tonight. Thank you as always. I hope you enjoyed the show. Again, a special thanks to Brian Dobby and Paul Castor for joining me here on the Coach's Corner panel earlier on. And once again, very special thanks to my special guest this evening, founder of the Kann Advisory Group, Kraig Kann. I will see you next week with another Coach's Corner and another insightful interview with my special guest. God bless everybody and have a great week.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this week's broadcast of Golf Talk Live. We'd like to thank this week's Coach's Corner panel, and a special thank you to tonight's guest. Remember to join Ted every Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. Central on Golf Talk Live. And be sure to follow Ted on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're interested in being a guest on Golf Talk Live, send Ted an email at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. This has been a production of the iGolf Sports Network.